So as far as bones and albies are concerned, there's really 4 categories of lures that are important for bonito and albie fishing. You have metals, epoxy jigs, soft plastics, and plugs. Now let's start with epoxy jigs. The Hogy epoxy jig is without a doubt my favorite lure to fish for bonito and albies with, and that's the case for a number of reasons. Well, for starters, let's talk about the translucent finish on the epoxy jig. As you can see, there's a thick, clear coat over the lure, and so that thick, clear coat's going to give the lure a translucency that's very natural and similar to like a silverside or a juvenile sardine or peanut bunker. So it has a very natural and imitative finish. Number 2, because they're predominantly made out of epoxy with a little bit of a lead keel inside the lure to help it swim, they're relatively light relative to their size. And why does that matter? Well, it matters for a few reasons. One, you can fish this lure at a slow or medium reel retrieve speed close to the surface without the lure sinking out of the strike zone like it might with a heavier metal. Number 2, they're lightweight relative to the size. Is going to give you some options in terms of how you can present to the fish. You can skip these lures on the surface, you can fish them slow, you can fish them fast. They're very versatile. And lastly, as these lures get bigger, they're still relatively light, so you can still fish with light tackle with the Hogy epoxy jigs and have a larger offering. Unlike a metal, say if you got up to a 4-inch metal jig, you'd be talking 4 ounces. With the epoxy jig, a larger presentation can still weigh as little as 1.25 ounces. So it's a very versatile lure. It's got a clear, natural finish. It has a very sexy action in the water. It allows a multitude of different retrieve speeds, and it's lightweight and easily fished on light tackle. Now the second lure category I'd like to talk about are the metals, which historically speaking is probably the most common style lure to target bonito and false albacore with. To me, the metals in my collection, despite the epoxy jig being my favorite lure to present to bonito and albies, the metals have a very important role. For starters, they are much heavier relative to their size than the epoxy jig, so in windy conditions or if I'm fishing from the surf, the extra weight is going to give me a much longer range. Now there's also times when bonito and albies are keyed in on super teeny little baits, and as you can see here I have the for example, the 1/2 ounce heavy minnow jig here, and so that's a very small profile, but it still weighs 1/2 ounce, so you can cast this lure with lighter gear. And then, this, for example, I have this 2-ounce heavy minnow here. It's a double thick design, so it has a smaller profile, but still weighs 2 ounces and can cast long distances. So I pretty much use lead or metal style lures when I need distance. When distance is the most important thing, and I'd be willing to sacrifice the sexiness of an epoxy jig. Metal, again, I go to when I need something long range. The third lure category I'd like to talk about for bonito and false albacore is soft plastics. Here I have teeny little Hogy Pro Tails, but similarly to the unweighted soft baits, a lot of anglers fish on the surface. I view soft baits as an excellent lure for blind casting, where I might use the epoxies or the metals as more tactical sight casting lures. The commotion from the paddle tail or the commotion caused between an unweighted soft bait on the surface will call attention to the lure. It can draw albies in. Now the downside to soft plastics over epoxy jigs and metals is they don't cast as far, and they're more prone to tearage from blues if blues are mixed in, but they can be an excellent go-to bait when albies are being very finicky and you have to resort, or spread out, you have to resort to blind casting. Now the fourth category of bonito and albie lures, I would say, are small plugs. Now you'll notice a couple of things. One, as you can hear, they're very noisy, and 2, they're larger than what you would normally associate for bonito and albie lures. Now these features are important for a couple reasons. One, their larger size is more visible, which is important when the albies are scattered, so you have a greater field of view for separated fish. Number two, there's times when there's so much bait in the water, it's impossible to compete with the small stuff. So I'll go to a larger offering and fish the perimeters of the school and try to target albies that have got separated from the bait masses. And these big noisy profiles are easy to call them in. They're easy to cast, they make lots of noise, they're easy to fish. It's a plug and play routine. They're also handy to have on board if you find a school of bass.